All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Barb, and I'm a principal planner with the Livingston County Department of Planning. We'd like to welcome you again today out to our Livingston County Planning Brown Bag Lunch event series. Today, we have a great presentation planned for you regarding broadband and the current status of broadband expansion within the county and the state of Michigan. Typically, at this time, we would go around and introduce one another, but due to the fact that we're on a mobile or a web platform, to avoid a little bit of that cumbersomeness, we're going to go ahead and move forward. This presentation will be muted for all the speakers. If you have a question during the presentation, we ask that you type it into the chat box, and those questions will be answered at the end of this program in order received. We would also ask that if you are new to our Planners Lunch series, to please type your name and your email address into that chat box so that we can have a record of who attended and we can include you on any future Brown Bag Lunch events as well. As mentioned, our program today is on broadband, and we have with us today Dan Manning. Dan is a community technology advisor with Connected Nation Michigan. Dan has extensive experience leading and managing the broadband landscape throughout the region and state, and will provide an update on where Michigan and Livingston County stands with regards to rural broadband access. At this time, we're excited to hear from Dan, and we would like to just turn the presentation over to him. And as mentioned, any questions you have, please again type those into that chat box so they can be answered directly after our program. So Dan, go ahead.
Very good. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it very much. And good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be with you today. Talk a little bit about broadband, what's going on across the state of Michigan, a little bit from a federal level as well, let you know some of the bigger things that are happening, as well as a little information about Livingston County specifically. As it turns out, I happen to be a Livingston County resident, so this is right in my backyard here, but I do spend most of my time working with communities in the southern half of Michigan, and have been doing that for the last 9 or 10 years here on a number of different broadband related projects. Most of them really focused on helping to get better broadband service and connectivity for residents and businesses across the state. So if you give me just a second, I've got a number of different things I'd like to take you through here. Let me share my screen so that we can get started with some of this. And hopefully you can see that here. Give me 1 second for this to set up. Okay, so it's broadband, a very broad topic, but certainly lots of activity around this, especially over the last year or two with the pandemic going on. Lots of information and needs out there for people in order to get better connected for school work, for working from home. Everything that we've been through over the last year and a half has really accelerated a lot of the projects and the activity going on related to this across the county, across the state, across the country, obviously. So I put together a number of different things that I thought I would share with you. And I'm pretty flexible in terms of where you want to go in terms of topics and directions. So like Scott said, if you have some specific questions, put them into the chat box, and I'll leave some time at the end so that we can try to address all of those. But what I thought I'd do is give you a little background on Connected Nation Michigan, also known as Connect Michigan, which is how many of you may know us. We went through a little bit of a name change here within the last couple of years. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but tell you a little bit more about what our mission is and what we're all about. Give you some basic background information on broadband. I know we probably have a pretty, again, broad audience here, people, different levels of understanding what broadband's all about. So I'll try to put some background information out about that. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in Michigan in particular, some of the things that we're involved with, some things that are going on at the state level as well. And then some updates from both the state and the federal programs that are going on to help drive additional increases in broadband connectivity, especially in the more rural areas of the state and country where it's badly needed. And then we'll wrap it up and talk a little bit more specifically about Livingston County with some of the information that we have on that currently, and maybe Kris can add to that if he's able to continue to engage with the discussion there, and then we'll open it up for questions. So hopefully that's in line with what your expectations are, and I'll take you through a number of these things here. So first of all, a little bit about Connected Nation Michigan. Again, we used to be known as Connect Michigan. We're a nonprofit organization, not really affiliated with anybody at the state level, other than partnering with various organizations like the Public Service Commission, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, DTMB, Department of Technology Management and Budget, and so on. But again, we've been around for about 10 or 12 years here, working with communities across the state in order to further the expansion and the use of broadband wherever we can. So there's a number of things that we're actively involved with. Our parent company is a national nonprofit, Connected Nation, which is where the name comes from. So we've kind of adopted that. We do have a couple of other state organized groups like us. There's a Connected Nation Ohio, a Connected Nation Texas, and a couple of others out there as well. We've done work in Iowa, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Utah, and a few others. But again, all nonprofits, but all with kind of a mission of expanding the use of broadband. So the way we do that is through a number of different vehicles. One of which is we're involved with some of the broadband mapping that goes on across the state and across the country to better understand where the broadband service currently exists, and more importantly, where it does not exist today, so that we can focus our efforts on trying to make that better and fill in those gaps wherever we can. We also do a fair amount of research, lots of surveys and information that we're always gathering about trends going on in the broadband industry, technologies that are being used, and so on. We do lots of surveys of local communities in order to get information from the residents and businesses about how they're using broadband today and what their current connectivity looks like, and so on. And then my role as a community technology advisor is pretty deeply involved in working with communities, mostly at a county level, in understanding and beginning some broadband planning processes in order to get them focused on broadband and what kind of things that they can be doing to help improve things within their county for both their residents and their local businesses. So again, we've been around for a while. We're a fairly small team, frankly. I cover the southern half of the state of Michigan, working with counties down anywhere from, say, Muskegon to over to Bay City and southward. I have a partner that covers the northern half of the state. Tom Stevenson basically does the same kind of job. We have a project manager that helps us coordinate a lot of activities that are going on there. And then an executive director, Eric Frederick, responsible for Connect Michigan, Connected Nation Michigan, as well as being our vice president of community affairs for Connected Nation, our parent company. So pretty small team, but a lot of resources behind us at Connected Nation and our headquarters, which is really based out of Bowling Green, Kentucky. So that's a little bit about us. Some of the things that we're currently very actively working on, one of which is a couple of years ago, we helped initiate a statewide broadband grant program, which we'd never really had before at a state level, to help fund some of the broadband related projects that a lot of our communities had been asking for. This is called the Connecting Michigan Communities Grant, or CMIC grants. We're now in our second year of awarding those grants. Last year, we did about $15 million worth of grants for local communities and broadband providers working together in order to address some of the local issues related to broadband connectivity. We're doing another $15 million now in the middle of that process. We're about to announce some of the winners of that coming up here in June. So it's a way, it's not a ton of money. You're not going to build a lot of infrastructure with $15 million, or I think $5 million is the kind of the maximum amount of the grant awards that we're giving out. But it's really to help spur some activities that maybe could be combined with other funds to do some infrastructure build out, some engineering studies, feasibility studies, and things like that as well. We've also been involved in some of these map updates I've talked to you about, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as well. Mapping is a very difficult and challenging issue with broadband because it's always changing, number one. And number two, there's some issues with the way that the data is used and gathered to create these maps, but I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We do kind of an additional level of detail in trying to refine those maps and get them a little bit more accurate than what we typically see from the FCC that publishes this information about once a year. We're also involved with some telehealth related applications and projects. A lot of focus on telehealth, certainly through the pandemic. A lot of people needing to be able to talk to their doctors, medical experts, and so on a remote basis because of the pandemic. So that's become one of the driving applications for broadband needs across the state. So we've put together, we did a study with 5 rural counties across the state of Michigan to understand some of the healthcare related issues that are standing in the way of doing more telehealth types of applications. And we've also had a number of spin-off projects that have come out of that as well. So we're getting more and more involved working with AARP and the Michigan Health Endowment Fund on some telehealth related projects. And beyond that, we just provide general support with communities, counties for the most part, but also down to a township level and helping them with their broadband planning, interfacing with local providers. And we often kind of find ourselves in a role of bringing providers and communities together to start having those discussions about identifying what the problem areas are and then figuring out ways to help solve some of those issues and making connectivity better. One of the other key functions that we currently play is that MEDC, which is currently kind of funding part of our efforts here within the state of Michigan, they've asked us to pull together a task force, kind of a steering committee for broadband related strategies and direction for the state of Michigan. So we formed this Connecting Michigan Task Force, which is comprised of representatives from all of the state level organizations that you see here on the left-hand side of the screen, so that we've got key people from each of these organizations that all have a vested interest in broadband being on the table to help direct that strategy and what makes sense to do for the state. So as you can see, DTMB, Department of Agriculture, the Public Service Commission, economic development organizations, Department of Education is also involved with this. So this task force that we now manage basically helps set strategy for where we're going as a state. Also provides input into the federal government on with ideas on new programs that ought to be developed. As you're probably aware, there's lots of funding now that's coming down from the federal government to help with rural broadband expansion. And part of the role of this task force is to help figure out and make sure that that money gets spent appropriately and used in the right places and not abused in any way. So, so that's a big part of our efforts as well, is making sure this task force is in place and doing the right things for local communities across the state. Okay, broadband. I said at the beginning that you know, people coming in with different levels of understanding what broadband really is and what it means. We kind of look at it in a number of different ways. There's different definitions, different technologies that are being used to deploy broadband, if you will. So this chart just shows some examples here of the types of technologies for delivering broadband or high-speed internet service, if you will. Mobile broadband is just that you can do through your smartphone. So you've got the connectivity there in order to get to the internet connections that way. Fixed wireless, another technology that the local broadband providers use for transmitting from towers and vertical assets like grain elevators and silos in some cases to transmit directly wirelessly down to homes. So you can get service that way. So companies like Surf Broadband and Visalink, Point Broadband, those kinds of companies that you might be familiar with, they're kind of in that business, this fixed wireless connections. Satellite service, often used as kind of a last resort if you really can't get any connectivity any other way. because there are some issues with satellites in terms of delays and expense in a lot of cases, and data caps and so on. But companies like HughesNet and Viasat, those kind of companies offer broadband service as well, mainly used out in the more and extreme rural areas where you really can't get to any other technologies through some of the other commercial providers. Down below, cable service. This is certainly the most popular and really probably the most pervasive at this point, especially within the urban environments. So this is your Comcast, your Charter, WOW Cable. All three of those companies are here in Livingston County and deliver service through a combination of fiber and coax to bring the signals into your home. Fiber is really at the heart of all of this. Certainly growing. It's the best alternative in terms of technology to be able to deliver the best and fastest and most reliable service to the home. Fairly expensive, although the prices are coming down. But certainly in order to meet the kind of demand for bandwidth and speed that we're going to need as more and more people are accessing broadband, fiber is really going to be the solution to a lot of this, and we're seeing more and more direct fiber to the home kind of connections through a number of companies. And then DSL is another technology which is just basically through your phone lines. So through the old phone companies like AT&T, Uverse, Frontier, and a number of others that are out there, TDS, that provide that kind of service. Lots of limitations in terms of how fast that can be, but in a lot of cases, it can serve basic broadband service needs. So lots of different technologies out there. These are essentially the primary 6 that are out there. Satellite, just as another comment on that, you may have heard a little bit about Elon Musk's entry into this with his doing SpaceX and the new Starlink service that's becoming available. These are low orbit satellites that are coming online and providing broadband service. It's already available in parts of Michigan. That's going to be rolling out a little bit more here over the next year or so. And we're hearing some pretty good things about that in terms of pretty good speeds that are being offered that way. So you'll be hearing more and more of that, which could be a big part of the solution for a lot of rural areas as well. And feel free to stop me if, I know I mentioned using the chat room for questions and all, but if there's something that you want to talk about a little bit more, don't hesitate to interrupt. I wanted to give you a little bit more on just how broadband is really affecting the state of Michigan and how we're positioned overall. A couple different parts to this particular slide. If you look over on the right-hand side of the slide, the map of Michigan, this shows where those coverage maps, this is a coverage map of the state of Michigan for broadband service at a current speed of 25 megabits download speed, 3 megabits upload speed. Which is basically the national standard, if you will, set by the FCC, that we're all kind of shooting to get everybody to that minimum level of speed. So the way you read this map is anywhere that you see green on the map, whether it's light green or dark green, shows where there is currently broadband service available through any of those technologies that I mentioned on the prior slide. So this is a combination of cable, DSL, fixed wireless, fiber, all the fixed kind of connections, if you will. The darker green areas, well, let me back up just a second. The green areas in general, this map is built on data provided by the broadband providers themselves. So twice a year, companies like Comcast and AT&T and Charter and a lot of these fixed wireless companies, all of the broadband providers themselves have to submit to the FCC twice a year their data that shows what areas they're covering, what kind of speeds that they're offering, what kind of technologies they're using, and so on. And then that data in turn gets consolidated by the FCC to show where there's coverage of any type at various speeds across the state and across the country. And then they publish these broadband maps. We then, our Connect Michigan team goes in and does a little bit more validation of some of that, where we know for a fact that service actually exists in some places, and in other cases it doesn't. So the darker green areas on the map represent those areas that we've validated that the service really is there. And that becomes an issue because frankly, some of the data that's provided by the providers is a little bit exaggerated, shows that there's more coverage there than what there really is. So it's important to get this as accurate as possible so we can identify those areas that really do need the help. So so that's what that map is all about. And this kind of a map is available through our website that you see down below. There's also a similar map that shows where there's 100 meg service, where there's gigabit level service. So you can see where that coverage is at a state level. And there's also county versions of each of these maps as well. And I'll show you an example of that for Livingston County here in just a couple minutes as well. So that's kind of how we take a look at where the broadband coverage is, and again where it's not, so that we can focus projects related to those areas that really do need the help and don't have the service today. So that side of the chart kind of shows you where the broadband infrastructure exists and where it's available. It doesn't necessarily mean that all those people that live in those green areas are subscribing to a service. That's really what the left-hand side of this chart is all about, that shows what the broadband adoption rate is, if you will. So this bar chart here shows generally that about 69% of the residents in the state of Michigan, the households, are currently subscribing to a broadband service of some kind. And here we're talking about fixed broadband services. So this is fixed wireless, this is cable, this is DSL and fiber for the most part, where you have a stationary broadband connection in your home. So about 69% of the households have got a connection today. And then the other bars that you see a little bit to the right there are folks that don't have that broadband connection, but some of them are using their mobile phones in order to get access to the internet. And you see some percentages there. 2.7% have got mobile phones only, and that's the only way they get online. Another 6.8% are using a satellite or a dial-up service. And you can see some of the other bars as well, which leaves about 11.5% of the households across the state currently do not have any kind of a connection for one reason or another. Either the service doesn't exist in their area, or it's too expensive for them to pay for, or they don't have the equipment that they need in order to get online, and so on. So there's still a fair number of people out there that for whatever reason are not connected. And certainly one of our goals is to help reduce that and get as many people on board and online so that they can participate in the current economy and take advantage of all that offers. Okay, with that, so that's kind of a broad picture of what we're currently looking at for the state of Michigan and what the coverage looks like. There's lots of activity going on that we're really pretty excited about to help address some of these issues and get service out to those areas that currently don't have it. So from a federal standpoint, again, you may have heard about lots of dollars being talked about and committed for fixing the rural broadband problem across the country. A lot of talk going on right now about the infrastructure bill and what's going to be contained in that. And right now there's about $100 billion set aside for that. The Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, which is a huge $20 billion effort that was set up last year, that the federal government committed for build out in these rural areas. They went through an exercise last year where they identified all of the major areas across the country and across the state that were what they called underserved or unserved by this 25 meg speed. And basically invited broadband providers to participate in basically an auction for that, and said, okay, for this particular area of Michigan that is not served with good broadband service, a provider can bid to say, I want to do that, and in return the federal government will give them X amount of dollars in order to make that happen. So a lot of that kind of a long drawn out process, but it turned out to be they spent about 10 billion out of the 20 billion in this first round of this RDOF fund. The good news out of that was about $363 million is now going to be invested across the state of Michigan for building out 100 meg service at a minimum, 100 meg and 1 gigabit level service to locations across the state that are currently underserved or unserved. And the map that you see on the right side of the screen here in both green and red shows where those build out areas are going to occur. And you can see areas like the Thumb, parts of the UP up in northern Michigan, where there's been pretty spotty service in the past, is going to see some major investment coming over the next 5 or 6 years from a number of different companies that are going to be coming in and installing fiber. Fiber for the most part in order to deliver that level of service to those locations. So it's really exciting. Michigan ended up being the number 3 state overall with a number of new locations that are going to be served. So we're pretty excited about that as well. So lots of major investment coming here over the next 5 to 6 years through this particular program alone. And then the infrastructure bill, if that gets through, there'll be a lot more money coming in as well. There's also some money being set aside for the rural and tribal funds, about $1 billion set aside to help bring connectivity to the tribes. Another $300 million is going to be set aside for more local community projects related to broadband. So lots of money coming in lots of different formats for different purposes, but all related to broadband. And one other federal announcement, an incentive that's out there that we want to make sure that you are aware of as well, is one of the barriers that have been keeping people from being able to access broadband in the past has been just the cost issue. It's been unaffordable for especially low-income families and households. So there was just recently announced this emergency broadband benefit program, which provides a $50 a month subsidy for low-income families to pay every month for their broadband service. So if there are low-income families across the county, Livingston County, or across the state of Michigan, they're eligible in order to participate in this. They just need to apply for those kind of subsidies, which can make it a lot easier for them to be able to get online. Okay, just a little bit more on this RDOF program. I talked about most of this stuff with the major build out coming from this $20 billion fiber rollout program and the $363 million that's coming to Michigan. It's all going to be fiber, like I said, for the most part, going to those unserved areas. These are the companies that are really participating in that. A couple of these are familiar names like Charter and CenturyLink. The other part of that's kind of a new player in the game are the electrical cooperatives across the state. There's a number of them that are providing electrical service to some of the more rural areas across the state. They are now getting into the broadband business, and they're doing that by providing fiber to the home service for all of their current electrical customers. And then we fully expect once that's in place, they're going to open it up and provide additional fiber service to non-electrical customers. So this is going to be a big help as well in reaching out to some of those more rural areas that need the help. And then we got things like Starlink coming through SpaceX, and some new players here coming in from the Atlantic Engineering Group and Mercury Broadband that haven't been in Michigan before, but have already made huge investments. And we're now meeting with them to talk about what their plans are for some of the build out that you see on the map here. So lots of good things coming. From a state standpoint, I mentioned a little bit about our grant program, the Michigan Communities Grant Program. We're in our second year of that. Again, we're about to announce some new winners of that. These are grants that can be applied for by broadband providers working with the local communities. So, for example, if we have some current areas in Livingston County, and I know we do, especially up in the northern and the western parts of the county, that need some help. If we wanted to apply for a grant to help address some of those issues up there, we would need to engage with a local broadband provider who's willing to make the investment in it, and then define what that project would look like, decide how much additional dollars it would take in order to address those issues, and then we could apply for a grant that way. So it's really the provider applying for the dollars, but working very closely with the local communities in order to support that effort. So we're going to announce some new winners here in June. We'll be starting another cycle of this probably later this fall. So we'd be positioned to go after some of those dollars if that makes sense. And I won't talk too much about this, but there is you're probably aware there is a Michigan Infrastructure Council Dig Once project portal, or they're basically the Infrastructure Council at the state level has developed this portal to keep track of construction projects going on across the state. So if somebody, for example, is going to be building a new road or tearing up a road and doing some trenching and replacing a road, that would go into this portal and make it available to all of the other utility providers, including broadband, to be aware of, so that we can coordinate activities and maybe bury some fiber at the same time we're redoing that road, so we don't have to kind of go through the same process all over again. A great way of helping coordinate projects and also save a lot of money down the road. So that's one effort that's going on to help consolidate a lot of these issues related to utilities like water and sewers and roads and broadband, and getting those all on the same page. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the other funding sources. We've talked about some of these already, the RDOF program, where that's going. The USDA has also got what they call the Reconnect program. This is also for broadband expansion in more rural areas. Another $600 million that can be applied for, again, by providers and communities working together to help address some of these infrastructure needs out in the more rural areas. They've just announced here, I just saw the notice this morning that they're announcing another round of that'll be starting here within the next couple of months. So just another source of additional funding that could be gone after if we need them in some of these rural areas. The USDA also has some smaller community connect grants that are available for very localized projects. A smaller pot of money, but again, can help fill in some of those dead areas in a given part of a community if needed to do there. We talked about the CMIC grants. And the other thing that's happening with all of this too, with all of the American Recovery Act dollars now that are being about to be released down to the counties and the municipalities, a lot of money coming to all of you for that. Broadband is considered an eligible expense for those dollars, and lots of communities, counties, municipalities are looking at broadband related projects to possibly be funded by some of these dollars. I mean, I know they have lots of other needs as well, but it's possible that some of those dollars, if you're in a township that needs some particular help, maybe some of these American Relief Fund dollars can be used for doing some local broadband projects to help you with that as well. So we're at kind of a strange place right now where there doesn't seem to be a lack of money or funds in order to do some of these projects. The key part of it now is just identifying what those projects are and working with the right broadband providers in order to be willing to take on those projects and do the builds and manage those networks going forward. Okay, I promised you I'd give you a little bit about Livingston County in particular. We have, I mentioned earlier, we've got a number of maps that are out on our website that you see down below there. Some of them are static maps that show where the coverage is and where it's not. This happens to be excerpts from this interactive map that we have that lets you zoom in down to a county level, even down to a township level, to show where some of that broadband coverage exists. That can be a real helpful tool for you. So, for example, on the left-hand side of the screen here, this 25 meg map shows where there, again, in green, where there is broadband coverage of some technology, again, either fiber, cable, fixed wireless, or DSL, that can provide 25 meg service across Livingston County. And I know it's kind of hard to see the actual county boundaries there, but it's the majority of the map there in the center. So what that means is that, again, there's infrastructure available in each of those green areas that you see across the map here Again, it's not 100% accurate. Certainly there are lots of holes within those green areas where people can't get the service that they'd like to. But this is kind of a high level view of where that infrastructure exists. And again, most of this is going to be provided by, again, companies like Surf Broadband and Invisalink, which are the two primary fixed wireless companies that are providing service in the northern and western parts of the county here. And you can see the darker green areas there that represent where their footprint is. And then the other major providers are Comcast and WOW and Charter and AT&T and a number of others that I'll show you here in a second as well. The right-hand side of the map on this particular page, where you see the orange or the pinkish color, is where there's currently cable service. So this is where the Charter and the Comcast service currently exists. And not surprisingly, it's really where the population centers are. That's where it's feasible to be able to put in these cable systems, because they're fairly expensive. The equipment is expensive and pretty manpower intensive in order to get it all installed and all. So, so again, you can see that most of the cables in the eastern, southern parts of the county, where the western, the northern parts where it's more rural, it's just not economically viable for the cable providers to reach out there, at least until some of these new federal dollars are becoming available. So we may start to see some expansion of the cable out into those areas because of some of these additional dollars. But I think we'll also see, with the advent of some of these big fiber rollouts that are coming through these RDOF companies and some of the new SpaceX stuff that's coming, that may help address some of those needs there. So a couple of views there of what the coverage looks like across Livingston County. And again, there's still, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's still a number of areas that are basically white or yellow there that really don't have that level of service, can't provide that 25 meg, which is kind of a minimum. So there are spotty areas across Livingston County, as there are across all the counties across the state. I thought I'd leave you with a little bit of a list of who the major providers are across the county. There are about 150 providers across the state. These are the key ones that are really focusing on Livingston County that currently have a footprint here. There may be some additional ones that come in, like I mentioned, from the RDOF grants that'll be coming in from AEG and Mercury Wireless and so on. They'll be doing a little bit of build out in Livingston County. Frankly, because of the relatively good coverage that already exists in Livingston County, there's not going to be a lot of some of this new RDOF money coming your way, but there is some. And if I go back to the prior map here, I guess it's not on this map, but there is a little bit around the Howell area. There's going to be a little bit of build out there. And if I remember, down in the southeast part of the county as well, a little bit coming through Ardolph. But anyway, these are the major providers. I've been talking with some of the township supervisors up in Conway and Cohocton and Howell Township as well, with a couple of these companies like Invisalink and Surf Broadband, and looking to see if we can create some projects to help improve their service levels out there. Midwest Connections is another company. They're an electric utility, a power company, but they're also getting into the fiber business. So they're starting to build out a little bit more. So we may see a little bit more of a presence from them over time. But these are the main players today in Livingston County. And then one other kind of tool that I thought I would mention to you that you might find helpful is we often get calls and emails from residents asking, I'm trying to get new broadband service. I just moved into my home. I don't know where to go. I don't know who provides service in this particular area. From this interactive map that I mentioned to you before with the link that you see down at the bottom of the page here, it does give you the capability to locate providers by just typing in an address. It will then zoom in on the map, and you can see the green dot there is really the Livingston County Courthouse there, where most of you are probably at right now. Shows your location and then gives you a list of all of the providers that should be able to provide service at that particular address. So it's a great tool to have to help identify this, at least to give a first shot at it. Again, it's not going to be 100% accurate. We always tell people, if you go through this and use this tool, if it says that Charter can provide service at your particular address, make sure you call them first and verify that they can actually do that. Because believe it or not, people have made home purchase decisions based on information in these maps, and then they find out afterwards that they can't get the service after all. But this is a good starting point for a lot of that. And then finally, I've got a number of different links that I would leave you with in terms of resources that you can find more information about what's going on in Michigan, anything related to broadband, some of the work that we're doing in other communities, other counties. I was on a call yesterday with Ingham County, Eaton County. So your neighbors there, they're anxiously looking at doing some broadband projects, some assessments on the front end to understand what their current environment looks like in order to start working with their providers a little bit more and filling in some of these dead areas and so on. So lots of activity going on across the state. So I guess with that, I would kind of open it up and see if you have any questions. Not sure how we're doing on time here. I guess we got about 20 minutes left, but certainly open to anything that you'd like to talk about, or I can go back and any particular topic that you saw that you might want to chat about a little bit more.
Dan, I think I would like to see if I could enlist Christopher Tobbe for a moment and see if Kris could give us an update on the current status of any broadband efforts here in the county. Kris, I think you're muted.
Thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate it. And Dan, thanks for a great presentation there. That really kicked things off in a good way, in a holistic manner here. As for the county, we've basically looked at the USDA's Rural Reconnect. We were on a fast track timeline with with Representative Slotkin's group to get a project in. And so what we did was we approached our project from a utility standpoint, where much like a water utility, you lay your trunk lines out there into your areas, and then you will be connecting up the residents and neighborhoods to those areas. So we very aggressively, in about a 2-week timeline, turned around a project that would put loops going out into the townships that would, some of them would rider onto our existing fiber optic cable that we have through the consortiums here in the county from different governments and school districts. But we're right now waiting to hear back if we're going to make it into the USDA's rounds and into the congressional rounds for funding for that $12 million project there. So we'll hear more back from them as the summer continues on and into the fall, whether or not we're going to be able to pursue those. But that's a big jump right there. If we can start providing large fiber loops going out into the townships, Conway, Howell, Unadilla, all around, it will give us the opportunity to create fiber optic thoroughfares and trunks that others can ride onto to push fiber out there to that last mile. Maybe it's wireless, maybe it's fiber, maybe it's coax. There are a lot of different avenues that can be taken. But if the county is able to lay fiber optics out there, we'll be able to get a good jump on it. So that's kind of where we stand right now. We are currently, with the help of the Livingston County planning team, with Kathleen leading that way, looking at a county-wide broadband survey in conjunction with a potential grant from SEMCOG and partnering with Merit. They actually did the Washtenaw County broadband survey, and we would be kind of mirroring that philosophy, if you will. So that's kind of where we stand right now.
Thanks, Kris. Thanks, Dan, for your presentation today. It's been awesome.
My pleasure.
At this time, Rob, Could you maybe read some of the questions they were in the order that they were received?
Sure. There was one that said, per affordability, is outreach being done to let individuals know about the subsidy? And two, does competition among providers keep consumer costs down? And there was a follow-up on those two, but I'll let you go with those two first.
Yeah, great questions. Yes, we're doing some pretty considerable outreach with the emergency broadband benefit program that I mentioned, the subsidy for the $50 a month off for low-income families. So we are doing a lot of that ourselves, Connect Nation Michigan, as well as through our Connecting Michigan Task Force team, and through all of those organizations that are participating in that task force. We've done a number of press releases already to kind of get the word out. We're also partnering with a lot of the local libraries, the whole library community, as a source of helping carry that message as well, because a lot of the people that are really in that situation, either low income and don't have connectivity today, will go to the libraries in order to get access. So you know, we're going to have flyers and information out that we can put in those kind of facilities, as well as maybe in local governments offices to let people know about this. But pretty concerted effort on making sure that word gets out. Now, all of the broadband providers have to apply and get approved as participating in this program right now. So most of them already have. I know Comcast and Charter have already got programs like that, and a number of others already passing that hurdle. But for the most part, we should have really good coverage for people to be able to participate in this, and we'll be seeing more and more about that. The other question about competition is a good one. Certainly, the more competition that's out there, the better, and it does seem to help on lowering the prices, the monthly charges for broadband service. You know, everybody likes to have options, and unfortunately, that's one of the bigger challenges that we have. And to some degree, that's the case here in Livingston County, again, in those northern and western parts of the county, where there's only one provider of choice that you can really go to, and that may not be deliver the best service. So the more that we can inspire more competition to get more providers out there, that does certainly help both with the price as well as the quality of the service that's being delivered.
There was a follow-up too with regard to the cost. Does the Public Service Commission get involved in setting rates? If not, who will?
No, they're not involved in setting the rates. The broadband industry is very unregulated. There's very little that can be done to help control that. It's really driven by market forces, whatever consumers will pay, depending on the quality of the service, the speeds, and all that. So again, that's why competition is such a big factor in all of this. If you got some other options, then the market helps drive, you know, who's going to be the winner in all this by providing the best service, the best speeds at the lowest price.
You must have mentioned something about COVID relief funding. Would you recommend that townships coordinate with the county for COVID relief funds?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, because I understand that the counties are going to be getting X amount of dollars. The townships will be getting their own allocations as well. And like Kris Tobbe was just talking about, he's doing some things that are going to help out some of these townships in terms of getting connected and providing some infrastructure. So you'd hate to see a township spend some money on something that's going to be something that could be further leveraged by the county down the road. So I would think there would need to be some coordination there.
If I may, Dan, anybody that would like to join into the conversations, we're more than willing to have the conversations with other partners out there from a county perspective. We really want this to be as inclusive as a project as we possibly can. You know, many hands make light work.
There was a question that says, has anyone on this board started conversation with T-Mobile They just released T-Mobile home internet for rural areas at $60 a month with the emergency broadband benefit. A low-income family would only pay $10.
Very timely questions. Matter of fact, I had a call yesterday. Our whole Connect Michigan team had a call with T-Mobile to talk about some of their current activities and what they're doing with their home internet broadband program, as well as some other business related stuff. So we're hearing some pretty good feedback from folks that are using the T-Mobile home internet package and what that can offer. I understand that's uncapped, so you're not limited by the amount of data that you can use, and the speeds have been surprisingly good from what we've been hearing from those people that use it. So if you're in a place where you can get the T-Mobile service, and maybe if you're limited on other options, it certainly would be something to look at. I don't know the answer for sure, and I meant to ask them yesterday as to whether or not they are going to participate in the emergency broadband program. But I'll have to get clarification on that. I suspect they will, which you're exactly right. If somebody subscribes to their home internet service, which is in the $50 to $60 range, they could be paying as little as $5 or $10 a month for that service. But they would have to be approved as a vendor participating in that program first. I just need to confirm that.
There's a general question that says, this may have been addressed at the top of the meeting, but is it possible to get this PowerPoint presentation? I'm sure Dan will probably make it available to us. And we also are recording these planners luncheons now, and we have our own YouTube website in the planning department. There's links on our main page. So just go to the planning website and you'll be able to find those links. And we do have a planners luncheon link that has the PowerPoint presentations if that's what you need to look at if you so choose. So
yeah, absolutely. And I'll send this presentation over to Scott after we're finished here.
There's a question here that says, if you're awarded the money for fiber loops, how long will it take to complete the project?
Well, this is quite the large project here. Public utility projects really do take some time and some planning there. There are a lot of concerns in regard to right of way and the exact loop. So number one, good data and gathering data direct from the residents and the businesses around the county is really going to be the most ideal starting point. If we're successful in partnering with SEMCOG on getting a grant and Merit on getting the surveys, we can then move into the design and engineering phases before we start to just tack fiber onto poles or go underground. This is, it took close to 80 years for telephone service to be pushed out to almost all areas of the country. I'm not saying it's going to take 80 years to do something like this, but it's a public utility project and it's a big public utility project. So applying a timeline to it right now is a little bit tough with the information that we have.
Another thing along those lines too that you might want to keep in mind is with all of this RDOF building going on and all the big investments coming from these companies and putting in fiber all over the country, there's going to be a squeeze on the supply of fiber and equipment and manpower, especially in order to do the labor that's needed to get this done. So you need to work that into your planning as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question that says, how much broadband could the county provide with its $36 million in stimulus funds?
Well, I don't think that we have any guidelines exactly on what those stimulus funds can be used for. So that's a big factor in deciding, what we can do with it. And quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, how those funds are divided up, that's going to come down to a policy decision that our Board of Commissioners will make, and we'll carry those out. How much will be allocated for broadband, I really can't say. This is a pretty expensive thing to do. Broadband can cost anywhere from around $18,000 a mile on the cheap side to $30,000 to $60,000 if you have to go underground and directionally drill per mile. So it's very, very expensive. There's a lot of labor involved. The raw materials are not exactly cheap. And much like Dan said, there's going to be a high demand for this. So we'll have to get on this pretty quick.
There was one last question. It just said, over the last 4 years, we put AT&T fiber into all 13 of our southeastern Michigan parks, which spread across the 5-county region. We would be willing to work with local counties to see if the residential customers near our parks can tie in some way, in some type of way for residential rural areas. That was from Mr. Rudolph. I'm not sure if that was a question or just a general statement, maybe.
That's a great idea. I mean, we're always looking for opportunities for partnerships in order to take advantage of resources that are already there. And if there's fiber out in those parks, by all means, local municipalities, counties, and other providers certainly would be interested in maybe figuring out how to tie into that.
I think we have Mr. Rudolph's information, so maybe we can provide Kris or someone at the county with that information to reach out to see if there's something there.
I have one more question to tie up this discussion time we have. It says, I live on Grand River. I only have one option for service. Is there any entity inviting other carriers into our area to eliminate the monopoly that exists right now?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a tough call. It's back to the competition stuff, right? And there are, unfortunately, it sounds like you might be in one of those pockets where you just, the current providers that are nearby just can't reach you for whatever reason, and there could be several reasons. But I would maybe take advantage of this interactive map that I mentioned as a way of going in and taking a look to see if there might be somebody nearby beyond your current provider that might be able to still reach you and bring service. Starlink may be part of the answer there too. If none of the other options work, once Starlink becomes available, that satellite service should be available eventually to everybody, where it might make some sense. So that could be an option, but I'd be certainly willing to look at your address. If you want to send me your address, I can do a little bit more exploring on that and see if there really are any other options that might be able to help you. But beyond that, this is where it gets difficult, is down to an individual address and trying to bring service to every single household that needs it, where sometimes there are some limitations that just get in the way for one reason or another, and we just need to find better solutions or an alternate solution.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all the questions I had, Scott.
Okay, great. Well, we want to just take a moment to thank everyone for your attendance today at our Livingston County Brown Bag Lunch. As mentioned earlier, we will be emailing you a brief evaluation of today's program and your interest in continuing our Brown Bag Luncheons via the Zoom platform. If you have any additional questions that maybe weren't answered, if you want to forward those to one of our staff planners, we'll be sure to pass those along to either Kris or to Dan. But we'd like again thank you for attendance today, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.